everybody. Welcome back once again for another fabulous Becker Vineyard virtual tasting. I'm Rebecca Nelson, the wine club director here, and with us tonight we have our winemaker John Leahy. We also have Dr. Joe Becker, and we have our general manager Bret Pernue. Tonight we are tasting a wine that I think a lot of people haven't actually gotten to try. This has only been at our Main Street tasting room location, and it's appropriately named our 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon Main Street Reserve. And so if you had visited the Main Street tasting room right here in downtown Fredericksburg, chances are maybe you would have gotten to try it. If you've only been out to the estate winery, it's not out there. So it was one that we wanted to make specifically for this new location. And I'm really glad that we released it for this virtual tasting so that everybody gets a chance to try it. I hope you've got it swirling in your glass. Everybody enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thanks again for another wonderful introduction. 14 weeks we've been doing this now. So. Anyway, Joe, would you like to say a few words to kick off the tasting?
Yes. So we're working our way towards 4th of July weekend, and we've had an unfortunate uptick in cases, and we're glad to be sharing these moments with everybody, and we're thinking about all the first responders and healthcare professionals in Texas that are now really entrenched in having to battle this virus, and hope that we can give whoever we can just a few minutes of break, of relief, and a glass of wine. As always, I think wine is always best shared with people you love and people you love being with.
That is absolutely fantastic and absolutely true as well. So I'll drink to that. Any excuse to sniff and swirl this wine. So I want everybody to do the same at home. Go ahead and give it a swirl, a sniff, and a taste. And then Bret, why don't you lead us off with the story how this wine came about? Not the real story, the one that we like to tell everybody.
So I always have to give the edited versions, right? No, I think that one of the things when we found this place in downtown Fredericksburg, our tasting room down here is the Cruz motor dealership that's fairly historic here in town. The Cruz family had it forever, and I guess probably about 5 or 6 years before we got this space leased, I was putting the bug in the Becker's ear, and we had looked at a lot of other places, and I think that Dr. Becker kind of maybe wasn't seeing the vision of having a place that was only 10 minutes from the main winery location. And so when we found this place, I said, if he doesn't like this one, then I'm going to quit looking. And obviously it turned into what it is, and we're really, really proud of it. And my wife Chris is the one that kind of set everything up, and again, it's just a place that on Main Street of Fredericksburg, not every single person that's walking the town actually makes that 10-minute drive, and it's just been something that's been really nice. And so when we originally, we had the idea like we should make separate wines for down there, and I think as we kind of went back and forth about what they should be, and we just kind of had this one present itself, and I kind of tell this story a lot, and I've told it too much, but when they present itself that way, John came in and said, hey, there's a really cool batch in the back that's small, and I think on our notes, John, it's 700 gallons. Is that right?
Yeah, it is right at 700 gallons.
Yeah, so again, that's not a big enough deal for most of the time that we're doing things, and I said, hey, that would be a cool one that if we made a little small batch from Main Street, maybe we should watch that one. And I think you kind of earmarked it, and we just kind of went along that way, and it came to be. And so that's really where it came from. We have intentions of maybe doing a couple more little small ones for down here if something that we get a single variety or something that's just really cool that may not be a big enough deal for everything else, but again, that's still a fairly sizable amount of cases. We need roughly a batch of about 700 1,500 gallons to make a wine for the wine club, and this one wouldn't have made that, so that's why you haven't seen it in the wine club, and we kind of that's kind of where it came from. So, and then as far as the label goes, I'll go ahead and get into that.
Sure.
You guys see that label on the host screen up there. A lot of people think that that's Admiral Nimitz in downtown Fredericksburg, and obviously the city of Fredericksburg has a history with the Nimitz Museum, and again, why I wanted to put a tasting room 10 minutes from the winery is I think the statistics are there's 2 million people a year that visit that museum. We get about 150,000 out at the winery, so that's a huge gap, and that was the focus. But that label is another Tony Bell painting, And I kept asking if anybody had any kind of recollection about what it was or who it was, but we don't know. The last I've heard, we don't know who that painting was of. It's just it's a pilot standing in front of a plane, but it does kind of commemorate what's going on in downtown Fredericksburg with the Nimitz and the Nimitz Museum, and that's why we picked it. So
Yeah, and I remember we were looking because not all of the bombers were named, and there's a database. These old boys that restore the planes and stuff, and some of the veteran pilots and things that are into collecting the old birds. They maintain a database of the famous named ones, and I think we were trying to look up to see if it was a painting of somebody, and we did not find anything on there. So, and I was just trying to see if I could discern the name on the label.
Yeah,
it's just a little too out. I have to go back to the original.
We looked at it on the computer and zoomed in on it. We still really couldn't read it, but and this label design, I've talked about our label design process a lot. This one took about 4 minutes. It was a right click of a file, dropped it in there. The label company stuck it on there, and it just fit perfectly. And it was an easy process. So
yeah, and we just gotta, while you're talking about the Crenwelgies, I would have to say, Gary, no, you can't get your oil changed in your Buick while you're at the tasting room.
And for those out there watching who may not be, I'm sure most people watching are familiar with Fredericksburg. It was my parents had such an attachment to the original winery, and wanted and the lavender and the wildflowers and the original grapes that we planted in our original homestead, that it was hard to envision selling our wine from anywhere else. And we found this place. It's actually a very beautiful place, and my father and I love history, and so for those that don't know, we're more or less across the street from the Nimitz Museum. Admiral Nimitz, probably our greatest admiral in our history, spent his early life there, and eventually it was actually in working at an inn in Kerrville when two men from West Point came in one night and gave this brilliant kid the idea of going elsewhere for education and being able to get out. And of course, he went to the Naval Academy, but for many reasons, it's a very special place. It's quite an honor to be there across the street from that.
Yeah, it's funny, while we're talking about that, every time we have out of town guests, I tell them, you're going to take 2 days and go through the Pacific War Museum, and the Nimitz Museum. It's a treasure that we have here, and it's been a couple of years since I've gone through, but I've done it a few times. I used to go. The ticket lasts a couple of days, so I'd buy one. I'd go after work a couple of days in a row just to wander through. It's awfully nice, and it really is a good location. Our downtown tasting room. I mean, we're right in heart in the center, so you get a lot of good foot traffic. So Bret and Joe, I want you to really dive serious into the nose and tell me what you all think. So Joe, what are you getting out of it?
John, this is interesting. My brother and I try to talk to each other about once or twice a week. And, one of the things he said that I agree with is that this wine, this wine has a lot of, it's almost like one of Jet's cabs. It has a lot of darker fruit notes. Sometimes when you taste some of the younger Canada cabs, they're a little bit lighter. But this is a darker, bolder, kind of full-bodied wine. It's interesting when you compare it to our other Cabernets.
Well, it is, and so so Bret, before I get into that, Bret, what are your impressions on the wine?
Well, and I think going back to the vintage, the fact that this is a 15 and we're currently on a set. I mean, most of the releases in the tasting rooms are 17s. I think that the fact that this is such a broad selection, and if I bust on I'm reading the blend on my other screen, but it is a very diverse blend of a lot of different vineyards through the state of Texas, not just in the hill country or only in the high plains. And I think you're getting those soft notes. Like, I think it's a bold wine, but it's kind of also kind of soft in a way. I think the flavors are bold, but I think it's kind of a lighter bodied cab, but that's what I'm getting. And again, to me, this is like the easiest drinking thing with, any starter or any, like you could pair this with a ton of different things as your starting wine even before dinner, I think. So
yeah, well, I agree with you right there. Yeah, and it is a smoother wine. There's some good tannin structure in there.
There is nice tannin structure there.
Yeah, I'm getting some really nice mellow notes coming out. The deeper earth notes are coming forward.
John, John, I've asked you about this on a previous tasting, that this has a very delicate tannin structure. Is this the type of cab that you're using? Is this a little Merlot, or what are you?
Yeah, well, yes, we did use some Merlot in there, and Merlot does help kind of round those things out, especially if you have a very harsh tannin. Merlot will help you quite a bit. This particular wine, we did not do an over extraction on there. Two of those lots, I'm looking, I had to look back through this afternoon to kind of remind myself and go back through my harvest notes from 2015 and the blend notes from 2017 to get through there, or late 2016 and 2017. When
we made it,
when we made it. So what I'm looking at here, I'm just going to go through briefly, and I'll answer your question, Joe, but in a rather oblique way. To answer about the tannins, we have to understand where the wine's coming from. So we've got Talent Vineyards. Of the overall blend, 37% comes from Druze Vineyard, 40% comes from the Reddy family, 16% from Wilmeth, and 8% from the Canada family. So of that, we're using Talent Cab, Reddy Cab. We're using the Canada Cab, a little Jet Cab. We're also using Talent Petit Verdot and Jet Malbec and Reddy Merlot. That 15 Reddy Merlot also made a wine by itself. And the Merlots that we've used from VJ, as well as the Steve Newsom Merlots, both have that nice rounding effect. So Jet's Cab has those dark notes. Canada Cab has those higher tannins. There's not a lot of Canada Cab in there, but that Petit Verdot from Drew Talent has got some dark, rich notes. And all of these combined together. So we only had 12 barrels of this, 708 gallons. So the interplay between the 10% Merlot, the 10% Malbec, and then the 5% Petit Verdot, and the rest of that 75% Cab. So you get just enough of the dark notes in there, a smaller amount, but then that Merlot and that Malbec play together to give it that silk. So and still tannin in there, but yeah.
And Druze Petit Verdot has always been a star. It's been mainly the backbone in our Ranger and our Ranger Haze and our Raven. It just gives that wonderful dark richness to these wines, and it doesn't seem to take much to do it.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. He's and actually I started looking at the 18 Petit Verdot, and don't tell Rachel, but I really kind of want to put out a Petit Verdot on its own. But don't spoil this.
No argument here.
Yeah, I'm going to tell her that she did a really bad job making it, and I'm going to have to figure out what to do with it. But yeah, that Petit Verdot is really, really good on there. So the other thing is of course age, and there's nothing in the winery that you can do to replicate Mother Nature and just age, just time. So wine really does need time to come together. I think we're really going to see that as a little plug for next week, a little early. We're doing all 2012s next week, and I think we're going to really see that come through. That 8 years in, what do they look like? And it'll be kind of fun, or 9 years in. So it'll be kind of fun.
So John, do you think that really what happened is there was a stack of 12 barrels somewhere that we forgot, and then you put them all together and you said, hey, this will make really cool
actually what happened, I wish it was like that. Then I could say, oh yeah, I just forgot about them. No, what we did is we put together, these were the tail ends, of the barrel lots that were put together from other larger blends. And what we did is we went back through and blended them together to see how they would taste. And it's like, well, let's put it together as a blend. So it just was a happy circumstance that they worked together so well. It's the hardest thing in the world is when you're like, okay, I need to make 1,000 cases of, reserve Cab. But I've got the tail ends of 5 different lots. I've got 3 barrels here, 4 barrels there, 2 barrels there. What do you do with that? Well, you try to do I just put 2 more barrels in the overall blend, or do I come together with another blend and do a smaller wine? And you had mentioned, which you glossed over, you're like, we really need to have a wine for downtown. We're opening this, we need to have something just specifically for the downtown tasting room. and just a few cases, and it worked out beautifully. It's like, okay, you know, we can get 500 cases for downtown, and it, as a cab, it doesn't matter if it sells in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. It's the downtown wine, you know, the Main Street wine, and it has gotten better and better every year. So it's only been out 2 years, but you know, in essence, you know, a little.
John, one of my
And-
favorite lines, just thinking about the weather in Texas, is this week talking to our sales team. David Bryce has been doing a wonderful job, but he said to you, he was wanting you to make one of the wines in a very specific style, and you looked at him and you said, well, I'll call Mother Nature and tell her to get right on that, because you know, that's one of the most uncontrollable things in our state is our climate. You know, that's makes growing wine here tricky.
Well, my other smart aleck response to him in the past was, he's like, couldn't you get it to ripen up early? We can get this out earlier, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you think I'm Jesus, but I can't make wine from water. Yeah, he's a peach to deal with sometimes, because he gets going, and he's funny. When he gets on a roll, it's like, and you're like, okay. So,
Well, John, the other thing that I remember is that you didn't just, I mean, I think that there was probably 30 or 40 barrels that you picked from to make this 12.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was being a smart aleck, but this was very pointed. There was, I think we did about 3 little iterations of each one of these that we actually, before we picked it. So
we're really going to look behind the curtain now, aren't we? Okay.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, if I have to tell the truth.
Yeah.
If I need somebody to yell in the background, you couldn't handle the truth.
Yeah, right.
Actually, after we got that first blend into tank, we ended up putting in more cab. So we actually took the original blend, we took out 3 barrels worth, and I put 3 barrels worth of cab back in the actual blend to increase the cab. And then those 3 barrels, we actually, I think one of them we used for topping, the other 2 went into a different blend. But that was the second iteration. That third iteration is when we put the extra cab back in there. So yeah, it's a dynamic thing. You know, it comes together, it tastes good, but would it taste better? Then you go back and you're like, what happens if I put 5% or 3% of this or whatever? It tastes better. And so that's how it ended up being, and that worked out beautifully that we were able to do that.
John, I think too, if you look at the lots that these are, I'm looking at them on my screen now, but I think independently, out of the 6 different batches that are in here, like all of them were in their own reserve program of a different type. This is just kind of a conglomeration of the Wilmot cab, the Canada cab with the Petit Verdot that would have been in the Ranger.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you look at that, it's kind of cool how that happened. And again, why I made a reserve wine. It wasn't just a regular one. It is the components of the big dogs that are in the regular lineup. So I want to point
Brett,
that out.
I think that kind of speaks to what we've always tried to do, which is to, you know, make a much better wine than people would expect for what they're getting. If it's, you know, especially at the reserve tier, but at any of our wine tiers. And it's this wine just sitting out just gets better and better. And I'm sorry, John, I cut you off.
Oh, no. One, I just wanted to answer a couple of questions that were scrolling by my eye real quick. No, Trish, we didn't replicate the wine for 2 years. I was saying that this wine could sit for 2 years in bottle and still be good.
And this is obviously American oak. We do all of our reds, most of our reds in American oak.
Yeah, except for some of the cab.
Yeah.
And I've been pushing for years for more and more French oak. And in all honesty, I think I've in 8 years managed to buy 50 more barrels of French oak than we originally were. But no matter how hard I try, how much of a smart ass I am. But yeah, most of it is American oak, and most of it actually was neutral. I really like 2 to 5 year old barrels for aging. It still has just a little oak in there, but it really allows the fruit to come through. When you put new oak on something, to tell people how we determine that, if you look at a standard size barrel, 225 liter barrel or a 59 gallon barrel, if you took all brand new barrels and put your wine lot in all brand new barrels right there, you would have 40% new oak according to the surface to ratio, wine to oak ratio. If it sat in there for a year, if it sat in there for 2 years, it would be about 45% new oak. You'd get more extraction out of there. So when I say we do 30% new oak on any given lot that's blended, that takes into account how many new barrels versus gallons and how long they were in. So when I'm figuring that out at the beginning of the season, it's cheaper to make wine on paper first before you put it in the tank. So you try to figure it out. And that's where Rachel a few weeks ago was like, yeah, and then you just tear the whole thing up when it starts harvest. And we don't really, but yeah, it's mostly American oak on there.
And my 2 cents on that is there's nothing cheap about making wine in a French oak barrel or an American oak barrel.
No, really. There's a price difference between the two, but there isn't anything cheap about it. No, you're right.
So John, I wanted, because somebody asked me this the other day. So this is 15. So these probably would have been harvested kind of mid to late August that year, and then
the talent would have been August. Wilmus came in September. Canada was September.
And so they would have been in barrel by November.
Actually, there would have been in the August stuff would have been in barrel by September, and September by October. Mid to late October, depending on how long the post fermentation maceration was. There are a few of these lots I like to keep in tank and warm them up and allow ML to go through. And we try to warm the tank up every day a little bit more and more. That's why we have that glycol heater out there. And that's why Bret it literally comes through the winery at times. He's like, yesterday this was cold. Why is this hot? And it's like, because we changed our mind. So we, it depends on the immediate post-fermentation treatment and how long it goes before it goes to barrel. But August, anything that comes in August is generally in barrel within a month of fermentation. So, by September. But when we blend, ideally, sometimes it doesn't work this way. Ideally, we'd like to blend a little earlier, get it in tank, and then put it back to barrel. Take all the barrels that those lots came out of, wash them, steam them, and then put the wine back in there so that they can meld together as a lot. But you don't want to do it too long because each barrel does start separating. So you're homogeneous when you first go in. 6 months later, you're not so homogeneous. Then you go through, taste the barrels again, everything tastes okay, then put it back together. I do a quick benchtop trial to make sure it's going to be okay back together. Then I say, yeah, go. And then it gets back into tank before bottling.
And I think that's an interesting part of the process that, when we taste, we do these Saturday morning tastings with Bret, John, Dad, you will bring these components out of barrel or tank or whatever and put them together and kind of look for direction and then age them together. And I think that's just been a wonderful part of these wines lasting so long and developing so well in the barrel.
Yeah, it really does help. So Bret, we need to talk about the Talent Vineyard a little bit because it's been a while since Drew was on. And I've noticed a few people saying yay on the Petit Verdot and stuff. Would you just give us a brief overview on the differences between the Talent and Reddy and Wilmeth?
Yeah, so Talent has Cabernet in this, and they also have the Petit Verdot. So if you ask Drew, number one, I think he's probably one of the greatest grape growing minds for sure in the hill country, for sure in the state of Texas. And I think that they're such different animals, just those two. And you have to, if you set him down and could have a cup of coffee with them, the Petit Verdot is something that they've done out there for a long time. And the difference in the blocks is, the land itself out there is fairly similar. Mm-hmm. If you're ever driving between Fredericksburg Mason and Brady, Texas, the vineyard is on the road to the left, and it's the bigger one of the two that you can see. He does have a low spot next to his house, and then the stuff that's up on the hill that goes up to the hills has a slight rise, and again the soil changes a little bit as it goes up that hill. But he really kind of started planting up that hill to get away from the frost damage that he could get kind of down in the lower end, and that's really what he's done over the years. And again, it's just produced incredible wines over, I think, every year that I've been here. I remember in 2006 when I came back, he called me and he said, "Are you ready for this? You got your big boy pants on?" And I said, "Yes, sir. We're ready to roll." He tells a story. He looked at me. He's
the only person I know, Bret, that's ever hunted a deer with a four-wheeler instead of a ride.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that time that he had the accident on the four-wheeler, that wasn't good,
No, kind of scared the Jesus out of us.
Yeah, but I think that again, going back to talk about the growers, we're supposed to be on Grower Wednesday, but the growers that we have on this lot, these are the rock stars of the Becker program. And it's kind of funny for me to even say that, because I think actually all of them are rock stars of our program that we deal with. But back in, the early part when I was here, we had a few growers that, they would call us and say, the fruit's not ready, but I've got a trip planned to go to Cabo or whatever, and we want to pick. And I just remember, Dr. Becker ingrained in my head way when I started that, we have to have ripe fruit. That's the only way it's got to be. And again, what happened is those growers didn't get the contracts the next time they came up. And so, probably past about 2009, somewhere in there, it kind of became a little bit easier, because I think we got rid of some of the problem children. And now we do have the rock stars that they're going to every effort to get the fruit to us as ripe as they possibly can. And just in certain years, it's not going to work. And we all have to kind of roll with that at times. And, I say that our winemakers get paid to fix the stuff that needs to be fixed, and they also get paid to make the stuff great that's great when it comes in, and without the vineyard side of that, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, the old adage is the worst year on record is the year that you actually earn your salary. Try to get stuff done. But
just to make a quick point, and I apologize for sounding like a broken record, but I mean, the Petit Verdot from Cruz Vineyard, was the original inspiration for our Raven, was the original inspiration, and we joke about it, for my father originally wanting to call our Raven, which is Malbec Petit Verdot, but wanting to call it Entre de Calmar, which means squid ink. Of course, everybody knows my mother nixed that, but the Petit Verdot is what gives it that dark, inky texture and color and richness to the wine, and that comes from his vineyard.
And it's just 5% of this blend. I mean, it's not a huge amount. I'm getting grief online about how I said make wine on paper. So let me explain to you. Yes, paper wine does sound like a great movie title. Cindy, thank you. If you write it, please get somebody really handsome to star as me.
Brad Pitt.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking like Pierce Brosnan. Actually, somebody was like, what do you mean is it cheaper? Yes, it's cheaper to make wine on paper. And all that means is plan, measure twice, cut once, except when I'm in the wood shop, no matter how many times I cut, it's still too short. It's never measure once and cut twice, just so you know.
I'm gonna chime in on that. That's all bull crap. You guys get to order what you want as far as yeast. And like Rachel was giving you a hard time. So, you have this plan and then it just goes whoosh. And then I remember that last pallet of yeast showing up from probably 2017's harvest.
Yeah.
And I got the bill and I had to sign it. And I'm like, there's $65,000 worth of yeast on that pallet.
It was not all yeast. You keep saying that. $65,000 worth of yeast. That's everything Denmark could produce in a year.
But John, does any of this have any of the Russian River Valley yeast you were talking about maybe last week?
Oh, Harold?
Yeah,
I would have to go back and look, Joe. I'm not quite sure if any of these lots got Harold or not. But I don't usually bring him out unless I think I'm going to have an issue with fermentation. He likes to stay in the freezer. So it's his favorite place. Whatever you do when you come over to the house, do not drink the ice cubes in the ice tray. Only drink the ice cubes out of the automatic maker. Just saying. But you would have no idea the look I'm getting right now. I'm sorry, I missed a question. I was trying to go back and grab it. I apologize. I totally missed the question. So if you have questions, please ask, guys. We're happy to try to answer them for you. Food pairings before we get on for next week's and the rest of this week's and everything. We have been asking. We've had a few questions about food pairings. So I'm going to hit Bret first. This will give you all 30 microseconds to come up with something there, Joe.
Yeah, no, I obviously I'm not going to say tenderloin, but I'm going to go with flank steak tonight because I think that's what we're having for dinner. Yeah.
Did you want to chew that?
Yeah, right.
What about tri-tip?
Yeah, no. Well, Texas, we don't do very much tri-tip. You know that, right? The tri-tip's more of a California thing.
Yes, but it's starting to, it's still.
So I have a friend that actually was part of the farmhouse thing with Katie Jane and her intern that was from I think she was a Texas Tech grad. She might have been a Tarleton grad. She was a Tarleton grad with meat science, and so that we were talking about doing our virtual tastings, and they thought about doing a package of like harder to find cuts of meat,
Mhm.
and as like a, as like a club thing. And I said, well, that's really cool, but the problem is that we had this great discussion about, how hard it would be to find hamburger. I said, hamburger's kind of lame. You could find it anywhere. However, they had some really neat cuts that you couldn't find in the regular store. And I said, that's what I would buy. If I had a choice to, try something new, we don't cook tri-tip. We don't really find it that often. And they had about 4 other choices in that pack. And by the way, I also lobbied to kind of partner up with them to do it, but I think they went off and did it on their own. So I think it is something that you can find online.
Yeah. Okay. I just got a question from a dear old friend of ours. He asks, how do you define when a barrel becomes neutral? Well, when Rachel and I are out in the cellar and we're standing near a barrel, and we get into an argument about what to do and the barrel doesn't move, it's definitely neutral. So.
John, have you bought your house yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So all those barrels we put the Swiss flag on are neutral. So if you come into the winery, you see them.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah. So the neutral barrel actually is after about 3 years of use for me, or 3 fills, 3 vintages, could be 3 to 5 years. Technically, a barrel will continue to give some oak for as long as 5 years, but after you've aged 2 years for one vintage and 1.5 years to 2 years for the next, you're pretty much used up all of that toasted oak flavoring in there. It still does a great job for an aging vessel. It still offers that beautiful idea that the larger the volume of wine to age, the better it ages. That's why wine ages better in a barrel than bottle, but it continues to age in bottle. So that does pretty well. So one more food pairing, Joe, just one more. What do you think?
I'm gonna offer 2. Number one, this is just such a delicious darker cab. It either, for me, it wants just a delicious New York strip steak. But if I have to say, if my 5-year-old producer were with me, he would want something with dark chocolate, which I think would also be a very reasonable pairing.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I'm seeing one right now, Mia. If I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, I apologize. But you're saying you're pairing it with pistachio crusted lamb, and chops with a Merchaud de Vin sauce. Oh my God, Merchaud de Vin. Yeah, of course, that's gonna go. Yeah, thank you for that. You can now exit Facebook. You've hit the pinnacle. I love lamb. Lamb would go very well with this. As far as dark chocolate, I would go with like a dark chocolate with like cherries on top, literally like dark, Italian black cherry sauce on a flourless chocolate torte. That would be good with this wine. I think it would be excellent, actually. So, Bret, next week, what do we have going on?
All right, I got to get my notes out because I get these vintages messed up. But so Friday we're going to do the Primavera, which is a single vineyard wine from the Ready Vineyard. I think it's Merlot based and a few other things from his place. But then we're also doing the library. We got back down in the library again for next week. The 2012 Barbera Merlot, the 2012 Estate Merlot on Wednesday, and then the 2012 Wilmeth Cab Reserve on Friday. That pack right there is something that, if you haven't ordered it, you should order it and have it late and just start watching our recordings a couple days behind. But one of the other things I want to mention while I have a second is we are starting to do private virtual tastings. So one of the things that with being closed and new ways that we're engaging with our club members and things that are going on is that you basically can invite 10 or 20 of your friends and we'll sit down and do a private version of this. You can pick which wines you want. If you want to do one wine a night, that may be an option, but most of the time it's 2 or 3. There are a few minimums you have to meet for us to schedule it, but for the most part, I don't think they're going to be that hard. And I keep joking with these guys. I kind of think they're going to be the social gathering of the COVID where you can do a happy hour with your friends and then have somebody do your virtual tasting in your backyard or whatever. So we just launched a new website today. My computer kept giving me an error that I couldn't even upload it, but the other computers that were here were fine. So I cleared the cache, did all that kind of stuff. And one browser would let me open it and one wouldn't. So we're still working through that because it went live just literally at noon today. So there's going to be some new stuff on that front. So keep watching for that. If you have questions about doing the private virtual tastings, then call the wine club department. at the winery phone number and hit extension 230, or email wineclub@beckerwines.com, and we can get you hooked up on that. But I think it's going to be something that's going to be fun, and we're actually enjoying doing these virtual tastings. This is our 40th episode tonight that's been on the live. I think we've done about 10 of the private ones. So
That's almost like hitting the third season of a sitcom.
Yeah, right. If we hit 100 episodes, we're gonna have to have a big party, right?
Yeah, right.
Maybe from Europe if we can go in this fall. If we get the
if they let us in.
right, yeah.
Hi, we're from Texas.
Yeah, they're like out.
So somebody just said, Joe, to your response to have you bought your house yet? Somebody just commented, John's not only bought his house, he took the wheels off, so he's permanent.
That's great.
Okay, thanks, Gary. That was awesome. So if you've enjoyed this broadcast, please share it on Facebook with everybody. It would be great. Introduce a friend to it, invite them in. And if you're feeling really generous, buy a friend a pack and send it to them as a surprise gift, as a hope you're not feeling too blue COVID gift. So, but yeah, we'd enjoy getting more people on here, certainly. But also, I think what we really do enjoy is the folks that have been following us for a while. We really do appreciate you guys hanging in there with us. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to everybody's questions. Please feel free. We'll try to go back through and answer them and update them up after we get off the broadcast. But other than that, I think we've had a beautiful wine for this Wednesday evening. So one more sip and taste.
And if I could just say, just to echo what Brett's saying, we love doing these virtual tastings. And I think, if anybody wants to pay to have wonderful wine and John's humor brought into their house, these virtual tastings are the way to go. But
I don't think anybody wants to pay for me to get in their house. Matter of fact, the police had something to say about that. No.
But I want everybody to stay safe this weekend. I want, if you have the if you have the choice between going out or staying in and being with family and sharing a glass of wine, I hope you choose to stay in and have a glass of wine and be safe. And I hope everybody has a wonderful 4th, and cheers.
Cheers to everyone. I will agree with that. And somebody just asked if there's a perfect attendance award. I said, if we make it to 100 episodes and you've been there for all 100, we'll figure something out. Trust me. All righty, guys. Everybody enjoy. Good health, great wine. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you on Friday for that Primavera. Cheers.